That should be good. Peace. I didn't want to forget my reading for the day. So this will be part 15, chapter 10, the candidate selection process. And the title is as follows. Let my neighbor pull in first, because you know he banging a little something. The selling of the candidate. A brief review of our prior discussion of the special interest and policy formation processes and a re-examination of the schematic diagram depicting the policy formation process should impress us with the fact that electoral politics, particularly as represented by the every 4 years voting ritual in the U.S., has relatively little to do with the actual process of day-to-day governance, policy making, and execution, or with the actual exercise of power by the mass electorate imposing its will on the U.S. government. We have seen that democracy in America has essentially been betrayed by the domination of governmental processes by a relatively small class of power holders. This is also true of the candidate selection election processes. The existence of an exclusive two-party electoral system, the decline in party organization, the fundamental similarities between the two parties, the need for candidates to be backed by rich contributors, large and costly individualized staffs, to engage in very expensive media campaigns, to place individual ambition, image building, and winning above dealing with substantive issues means that the will of the people as expressed through their voting patterns rarely expresses itself in actual governmental policy, decision-making, and practical government. The need for a candidate to obtain strong financial backing before mounting a credible primary campaign, let alone before making a final run for political office, often means that he has been compromised, if not bought, before he presents himself to the people for election. The power to influence the process of governance begins before the election, and those groups who generally lack the monetary and other relevant resources to influence the pre-election candidate selection process are already out of running for achieving significant influence in the governance process. This, despite their heavy voting in favor of one candidate as against the other. This is aptly implied by Parenti's observation that supposedly one of the great gifts of our democracy is the right to vote for the candidate of one's choice, but the choice is often narrow and or restructured by a variety of undemocratic features. Parenti, in the same vein, notes the following. The ostensible purpose of electoral competition among political parties is to hold rulers accountable. According to Western democratic theory, popular elections counteract the oligarchic tendency by institutional. Y'all got to pardon me. There's I cut the light on, and whatever little bugs and mosquitoes is around, they just keep flying and irritating me. Listen to you. Okay. According to Western democracy theory, popular elections counteract the oligarchic tendency by institutionalizing the power of numbers. An election, like an opinion poll, is supposedly a measure of mass sentiment, but also mandatory decision and exercise of sovereign power by the many. The democratic goal is not only that the many shall have their say, but their say shall have an empowering effect, that it shall be both the public opinion and the popular will. The right to free speech and dissent, even assuming such a right could be exercised without risk to the dissenter, is not democracy's sum total, but merely one of the necessary conditions for holding those in office accountable to their constituency. One can imagine a situation as exists in our better universities and prisons in which the constituents might be free to complain of conditions, petition the authorities, read critical newspapers and books, and even write them while exercising little or no power over the decision makers. Democracy, as it is practiced by institutional oligarchs, consists of allowing others the opportunity to say what they want, while the oligarchs, commanding all institutional resources, continue to do what they want. It has been noted by a number of political scientists that the candidate selection process have become increasingly individualistic. Name recognition and personal image are important assets in any politician's run for high office. However, the candidate's personal ability to buy the kinds of services with which to achieve recognition, to publicize his or her positions and abilities, is often very limited. Herbert Alexander concluded from his study of how political campaigns are financed that because of its ability to buy the kinds of services that produce name recognition and exposition of positions, money wields its greatest influence on campaigns, particularly presidential races, during the pre-nomination period. Consequently, candidates become vulnerable to the influence of fat cats, effective fundraisers, and contributors of political action committees, many of which are connected directly or indirectly with the corporate oligarchy. Oligarchy. I believe it's oligarchy. Tell me how to pronounce it. I'll figure it out later. The ability of the power elite to provide crucial financial support for both parties on the national level generally far outweighs that of the unions and other sources of funding more closely related to the masses of the population. Domhoff argues that through relatively simple and direct means and large campaign contributions, members of the ruling class can in good measure dominate the candidate selection process as prospective office holders seek to distinguish themselves from their competitors and to project an image which will compel the electorate to vote for them. He goes on to argue, in the guise of fat cats and money raisers, the same men who direct corporations and take part in policy groups play a central role in the careers of most politicians who would advance beyond local level or state legislatures in states of any size and consequence. Recruitment of elective elites remains closely associated, especially for the more important offices in the larger states, with the candidate's wealth or access to large campaign contributions. Moreover, the role of the wealthy donor and the fundraiser seems to be especially crucial in the nomination phase of the process. This was the conclusion of one of the earliest system is put into serious question in light of the central role played by heavy campaign contributions and services provided by the ruling elite and those under its ideological influence. The legitimacy of this system is especially questionable when one looks at the products of the candidate selection process. This system generally produces a legislative and governmental system top-heavy with lawyers, a large number of well-to-do politicians who are eager and willing to go along to get along, precisely the kind of politicians who are necessary if the special interest process is to operate the way it does. And second, a great many politicians with strong policy positions of their own who are thus open to the suggestions put forth to them by the corporate executives and academic experts who have been legitimated as serious statesmen and leaders within the institutions of the policy planning process. In other words, the evidence shows that the candidate selection process naturally produces the kinds of elected officials whom we know must be in office because of the ways in which the special interest and policy planning processes operate. We can begin to see why the three processes mesh together so well, even though they are relatively independent. So tomorrow when I get in here, we're going to talk about party politics, and we're going to continue until we get to the rest, and we're going to start all over when we finish. I hope your today is great, and may your tomorrow be greater. Peace.